Have you ever caught yourself already rehearsing an excuse for the morning before the night had even had a chance to disappoint anyone? I'm 83, and for years that rehearsal was routine for me, right up until I started taking one spoon at bedtime of something already sitting in my spice rack. In a randomized, placebo-controlled trial, men taking a modest daily dose of this exact spice for 6 weeks showed a meaningful improvement in erectile function scores compared to placebo. I never said it out loud, not to her, but that was the fear underneath everything. Not the moment itself, but what it meant about whether I was still the man my wife had married. If you've ever felt that specific kind of dread, fear of letting down the one person whose opinion matters most, I understand it completely. I lived inside that fear for longer than I'm proud to admit. That 6-week trial is what finally gave me something concrete to try. In a minute, I'll tell you exactly what the spoon was and why it mattered more than I expected. What eventually changed things for me was learning that an erection depends on 3 systems working together: the hormonal side, the nervous system signal, and blood flow, governed by a molecule called nitric oxide that tells your arteries to relax and let blood in. That third piece is the one almost nobody explains, and it's usually the one quietly losing ground first as the years add up. Once I understood that, the whole fear reorganized itself in my head. It wasn't about my character, my desire, or how much I loved my wife. It was circulation, an ordinary physical system, no different from the one that determines how quickly a cut heals or how well your legs hold up on a long walk. These days, I have more real energy than I did at 75, and I don't carry that same low hum of dread through my evenings anymore. I've started cooking again most nights, something I hadn't done consistently in years, just because I have the energy left over after dinner instead of collapsing into a chair the second the dishes are done. My wife says the kitchen smells like something worth coming home to again. Here's what reframed the whole thing for me. The blood vessels involved here are some of the smallest in your entire circulatory system, smaller than the ones feeding your heart. So circulation issues tend to show up here first, before anywhere else in the body. Researchers who study this treat it as an early signal worth paying real attention to, worth bringing straight to your doctor instead of quietly carrying alone the way I did for years. For 3 years, I slept 3 feet away from my wife, and it felt like 300 miles. She'd fall asleep first. I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, wide awake, feeling like a roommate in my own marriage. I thought something was wrong with me. It wasn't weakness, and it wasn't just age. Here's what no one ever sits a man down to explain. This isn't about willpower. It's about specific systems in your body quietly losing steam year after year, while nobody tells you it's even happening. The pills my doctor handed me gave me headaches, made my chest feel tight, and honestly, they made me feel like I needed a pill just to feel like a man. I wasn't willing to live like that. There's a gentler way to bring those systems back, without any of that. At 83, my wife and I aren't roommates anymore. I'll show you exactly what changed it in this video, and if you want the simple support I personally use, there's a free presentation linked in the description below. So here's the one spoon I mentioned at the start. Saffron, steeped as a simple tea before bed, nothing more complicated than that. There's a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial where men took a modest daily dose of saffron for 6 weeks, and their erectile function scores improved meaningfully compared to the group taking a placebo. It's a small trial, and I want to be honest about that. The sample wasn't huge, and researchers are still building out this body of evidence, so I'm not presenting this as a settled, universal fact. But the improvement measured was real, and the mechanism researchers point to involves saffron's effect on mood and on smooth muscle relaxation, both of which play directly into this whole system. I started brewing it most evenings, steeped in hot water for a few minutes, the same simple ritual you'd use for any tea. It became part of winding down instead of one more thing to remember. There's something quietly comforting about a ritual like that, separate from whatever it's actually doing physiologically. Standing at the kitchen counter each evening, waiting for the water to steep, gave me a few minutes to just be still, which turned out to matter almost as much as the tea itself. I added a few other pieces, vegetables rich in dietary nitrate, a short walk most mornings in daylight, better sleep, less alcohol. None of it felt like a project. It felt more like finally paying attention to something I'd ignored for years, one small piece at a time, without any of it turning into a chore I dreaded. I gave the whole combination a genuine 6 weeks, matching the actual trial timeline, rather than judging it after a few disappointing days the way I'd judged so many other things before it. That patience, more than any single ingredient, is probably what actually made the difference in the end. My wife and I had a quiet evening in a few weeks ago. Nothing planned, just dinner and conversation. And there wasn't a trace of that old hesitation in how the night went. She actually commented, unprompted, that I seemed more relaxed lately, in general, not just at night, not just in the bedroom. I think about a man named Raymond, who wrote in, 79, who told me the word disappoint had haunted him for years, the exact same way it haunted me. He said once he had something concrete to try, something backed by an actual trial instead of another vague promise, the dread itself started to lift before he even noticed a physical change. He said just having a plan, something specific to point to, changed how he carried himself at home almost immediately. Raymond told me the strangest part was how much lighter he felt within the first week, well before any physical change had actually kicked in. He said just having something concrete to point to, instead of a formless dread he couldn't explain even to himself, changed the whole atmosphere of his evenings. He also told me something that stuck with me for a long time afterward, that his wife had noticed the shift in his mood before she noticed anything else, and that she'd assumed at first he was simply in a better mood generally, not realizing it was tied to something so specific. He said watching her relax, once the tension between them started easing, mattered to him almost as much as anything happening physically. If you're on medication for blood pressure or your heart, please hear this clearly. Nothing here replaces your treatment, and you should never stop or change a medication on your own. Mention anything new to your doctor first, every single time, no matter how small it seems. What I want you to walk away with is this. The fear of disappointing someone you love does more damage than almost anything else in this whole situation. Understanding the real mechanism and having something real to do about it is what finally let that fear go. I wish I'd understood that years earlier, honestly. So much of what I suffered through wasn't really about my body at all. It was about the story I kept telling myself about what my body's occasional unreliability meant about me as a husband, as a man, as someone worthy of being loved without qualification. That story, once I finally saw it clearly, turned out to be the heavier burden the whole time. Heavier even than whatever was actually happening physically. Understanding the mechanism didn't just change what I did before bed. It changed the entire narrative I'd been quietly telling myself for years, and letting go of that narrative mattered every bit as much as anything I actually took or ate. Your erections don't disappear just because you got older. They fade when the systems behind them, blood flow, nitric oxide, hormones, energy, and recovery, slowly stop getting the support they need. Ignore that long enough, and it becomes harder to reverse. That's why I take this concentrated formula every morning. Not one ingredient trying to fix everything, but several working together to support circulation, energy, and drive from the inside out. It's a natural, doctor-backed protocol designed to support pathways your body already knows how to use. No prescription, nothing artificial. Stronger, present, confident again. And unlike the pills I tried, I didn't feel disconnected from my own body. No headaches, just steady, gradual change. My wife noticed before I even said a word. The presentation is linked right below this video. It won't replace your doctor or a healthy lifestyle. It's simply there to support your body. At 83, my wife and I aren't roommates anymore, and it's not too late for you. I think about the man I was, carrying that quiet dread through every evening. And I think about the man I am now, who doesn't anymore. That's not vanity, that's dignity. Being present with the person you love instead of bracing for disappointment. Presence, it turns out, was the actual thing I'd lost. Not performance, not some measurable outcome I could chart on paper, just plain presence. The ability to be fully in a moment with someone I love instead of half watching from a distance, braced for something that might or might not go wrong. If that fear of letting someone down sounds familiar, tell me about it in the comments below. I'd genuinely like to know how many of us have carried that exact same quiet dread. And if this kind of honest explanation helps, go ahead and subscribe. There's more of this ahead every single week, and I read every comment personally.